Hi Vinyl community, hi James. This is going to be my reply, or my reply video to this question that you asked James about what a Grail is, or what is a Grail. I'm assuming that you know the sort of the religious sort of background, this sort of notion that the Holy Grail is supposed to be the chalice or the cup that Jesus Christ served his Last Supper in. Another reference I've seen as well is that supposedly it's a cup, or if it's the same one I don't know, that Joseph Arimathea used to capture some of Christ's blood while he hung on the cross. Joseph Arimathea is the guy that's arranged for Jesus to be buried in a tomb and all sort of stuff. And the idea of this particular cup or chalice being so important, I think, was woven into the King Arthur Excalibur legends, and essentially it's really sort of something that a lot of people sort of take a long and arduous journey to search out this particular lost relic. So that's my understanding of what the real is. Of course, what we're talking about is a metaphor for just that thing that we isn't just so readily available that we can go and pick up any time. It's something that we've got to search for, a treasure ultimately, the treasure that we're sort of would love to get hold of. But we've got to search for it, and we've got to struggle, go the extra distance to get our hands on this thing. I think we probably do overuse that phrase, because assuming there's in the real essence of the word, the Holy Grail, there is only one. There's only one Holy Grail, and we talk about a Grail. I've got some records here I'm going to show you in a while, and they're grails. I would describe them as being grails, but the phrase a grail obviously must be wrong, because if there's only one grail, we would say I found the Grail. But I wonder where the fun is in that. Or do we just give up record collecting when we find that one true Grail? That would be a bit dull, wouldn't it? I think it's one of those phrases or words that get overused, much in the way maybe a lot of people would use the word masterpiece. That's obviously overused. I read a lot on the Prog Archives website, and so many people will describe particular albums by particular bands as being a masterpiece, and I always think it's silly, because some people will even write that in a review of a particular album that was released last week. Really, how could you possibly rate this as being a masterpiece? You barely know the record, it's just so new out, and it's, I think, but that's just the way people are, I suppose. Language changes, doesn't it? Evolves, and maybe one day there'll be a new phrase or a new word which means essentially the same thing. I'm going to show you one or two things that were grails for me, and I guess I'm going to use them as a way to sort of illustrate my view on it. I've shown this before. This is the Who live at Leeds. I had a repress copy of this. Like the record, really, probably the best live album ever recorded. This is special because it's an original. It's all very much intact, and it was issued with a bunch of papers, basically photographs and you know, contracts, and I think there's a poster in there and a few other bits and pieces. These are all the original bits, and so I was really happy to get hold of this. I paid $1 at a garage sale in California, and yeah, I've spoken about the story before in the VC. I won't go over it again, but this for me was a grail. So it was an amazing thing to find it the way I did. Yeah, so that's one grail. Another grail is this one. I've shown this one too, I think. Although it's a little bit of a cheating grail, I suppose. I got hold of this record simply by buying it on Discogs. It's this very first record I'd ever bought on Discogs. I don't do it too often, but this is a record that I've been after for many, many years. It's The Act, Too Late at 20, and you know, there's little or no information about them really, and I was really happy to have sort of finally find this on Discogs and buy it, and I think it was cheap, £2 or £3 I suppose. Yet you'd never find this in the wild. I've never ever seen any reference to them in the wild. So the acts basically are Nick Laird-Clowes from the Dream Academy, and this guy, I believe, is Mark Gilmour, which is he's a lead guitarist, David Gilmour's brother from Pink Floyd. So it's like their first early band. The record's really, really good. It's really sort of punchy, sort of poppy, punchy pop, I suppose you might call it. And yeah, I'm so happy to have it. I'd looked for a long time for this and it never turned up. So those are two records that I would hold up and say they were grails for me. And then I've got a few more that I bear in my mind that I'm looking for, and will be really happy when I get hold of them. James, you asked about if you get a record and it turns out not to be the wonderful thing that you thought it was going to be, or if it was a bad press, or if it was damaged and it sort of diminished your enjoyment of it, would it still be a grail? In that case, I would say no, because ultimately, I mean, it's how individuals that collect records regard individual things. You know, the beauty is really how you perceive it. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So if this is something that I really want and I'm looking for and I can't get hold of, whatever it is, if it satisfies that need to get hold of it, then that's where the grail aspect of it comes in, I suppose. But if you get it and it's no good, or it's scratched up or something, then you might say, well, this could have been a grail, but it doesn't quite meet my expectations. Something like that happened to me. I bought a Judy London compilation, completely fell in love with Judy London's voice, fantastic jazz singer, and I focused in on her first two albums, which are acoustic without the sort of like the big band orchestration, and I really wanted to get hold of those two. I got hold of one of those. I can't remember how, I bought it from somewhere, but I do remember being really, really disappointed with it, because I was expecting it to have this gorgeous, flawless, rich sound, which I hear on the tracks on the compilation, but it turns out, well, it's a cheaper reissue that I bought, and the sound quality is quite poor, even to the point where it's almost distorted. Her voice is sort of, rather than being soaring, it sort of gets to a point when it distorts a bit, and that is a bit of a grail that could have been, but wasn't so, because it wasn't the real thing. There's a line in that Indiana Jones film, Raiders of the Lost Ark, number 3 I think it is, the Grail, talking about the Grail. The Grail was the cup of a carpenter, So rather than picking out the golden one, there's Grails on the shelf there, and they've got to choose which one is the correct Grail. Rather than picking out the golden one and getting the wrong one, they pick out the one that they know is most likely going to be the correct one because, well, it was owned by a carpenter. It would have been a simple, fairly simple wooden one, very basic. And I suppose that's true of records. You can perhaps reach for the wrong one, like I reached for this particular Julie London record, and ultimately it was the wrong one. It was disappointing. I really do need to find that original one from the 50s or 60s, whenever it was released, and then only then will it satisfy my my need for that record, if you like. So I got a question to bounce back to you, James, and anybody else that wants to kind of think about this as well. If there was only one Grail, so rather than having lots of different Grails, if there was only one vinyl record Grail, what would that record be? I've mulled this over for a day or two now and thought of a few sort of candidates. One, for instance, could be maybe Ringo Starr's original version of the White Album, the number one, so 000001. That sold for a lot of money recently. I could see that that might be something that someone wants to get their hands on, and so, like the Holy Grail that can't be found, is sort of that thing that people search for. Another one I thought maybe would be like the original first pressing, first off the factory line copy of the Rocket 8845. That's supposedly the first rock and roll record, and ultimately, you know, if that's what it is, then it's, you know, gone on to inspire all the rock and pop music that we all know and love and enjoy collecting. So that very first one, you could see how that might be considered the true Holy Grail. I don't know if there are any others. It's probably a difficult one because people have different tastes, and you know, they'd say, well, this can't be a Grail because I don't really like that type of music, or whatever. But ultimately, if there was one true Holy Grail of records, what would it be? Okay, James, have a good weekend. It's Sunday, sun's gone in. It was sunny a little while ago, but I came in to do this anyway. So thanks very much for listening. Check out my next video. Bye.